Hello everybody, welcome to today's webinar, How Top Security Vendors Achieve Their Revenue and Margin Goals. I'm Justin Sargent and I'll be hosting today's session. The enterprise security market has been rocked with big changes this year. HP and Symantec split their businesses and are launching new go-to-market strategies to compete more aggressively for security market share. Dell and IBM are expanding their portfolios, while Intel is narrowing its focus on specific security segments. At the same time, the number of startups entering the security market remained high. Amid all this disruption, security vendors and security services are adapting their strategies and aligning with different partners to achieve their revenue and profit goals. TBR has tracked these changes in the most recent publication of the Enterprise Security Benchmark. In our webinar today, Jane Wright, the lead analyst for TBR's security practice, will present key findings from the Enterprise Security Benchmark report. She will show you how different types of security vendors performed in early 2015 and the strategies that help them meet their goals. She will also present TBR's estimates for enterprise security revenue trends in different geographies. As a reminder, insights from today are from TBR's Enterprise Security Benchmark. If you'd like to learn more about this report or our security research, please reach out to myself or Jane after the presentation. Now, before we begin, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover. First, we'll be recording today's session and posting it on our YouTube site, TBRI channel. We encourage you to visit this channel to watch this presentation or any of the previous presentations we've posted. Second, Second, I'll be following up all of you via email tomorrow afternoon with the link to today's recording as well as with the slides, so be on the lookout for that. Finally, we welcome questions on the material we're presenting today. Please send any questions you have to the Q&A function, and we will address as many as we can at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'd like to hand this over to Jane.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining our call today. Please let me know if you cannot hear me loudly enough. So for our presentation today, I'm going to be talking about TBR's sizing of the enterprise security market. And just as a quick reminder, I want to just fill in everybody on what we mean by enterprise security. In our benchmark and our coverage, we consider an enterprise to be any customer that is not a direct consumer customer to security vendors. So we're capturing your revenues from sales to small, medium, and large businesses, sales to government customers, sales to service providers, basically anything that is non-consumer, we are reflecting it. We also are looking at security hardware and software and associated subscriptions and maintenance revenues, as well as security managed and hosted services, but we are not including security professional services in our coverage here. So that just gives you a little bit of the look of what we'll be talking about, and we sized that market at about $50 billion in last year. It will be even bigger this year, 2015. Okay, with that housekeeping out of the way, here's the agenda I'll be talking to you about today. We're going to take a look at some key trends of things that I see vendors doing right now. In some cases, I see vendors delaying profits, and I'll talk to you about the reasons why. And we've seen some great activity from niche security vendors, so I'll define those for you, give you some examples. Then we'll look at the way TBR has classified all the vendors that we cover. We cover 19 security vendors. We've grouped them into 3 classes, and I'll show you some things that are happening that are differences between the classes. For example, the core vendors, who are the biggest ones, and some pure play vendors and what's happening there. We'll take a look at the 8 segments that TBR uses in its taxonomy for the enterprise security market, and we'll look at the ones that are growing fastest and talk about why. And then finally, we'll take a look at the geographic market trends recently in the enterprise security market, and we're going to notice something really slowed down in EMEA. Here are the trends that I will be talking about today. First off, when we take a look at pure play security vendors who are advancing well, and here I'm thinking about FireEye and Palo Alto Network in particular, these vendors still are not profitable. They still have a negative bottom line. And but they're growing so well, so there's a question of, well, why have they not yet turned a profit? And what we see happening in these advancing vendors are that they're spending more than the average on sales and marketing a larger percentage of their revenue. So, for example, in 2Q15, which is the focus of this benchmark report, in 2Q15, FireEye spent 79% of its revenue on sales and marketing. FireEye grew very fast. Palo Alto Networks spent about 57% of its revenue on sales and marketing. It also grew very fast, but typically a sales and marketing spend for a typical security vendor is about in the 20 to 30% range. So clearly spending on security, sales and marketing does drive growth. Now, I am absolutely not implying in any way that these vendors bought their growth. That's not true. This is what's really happening. The security market is growing very, very fast. We estimated about 19% year over year for the total market growth. Vendors that are pure play, advancing, coming along quickly, those vendors must invest in sales and marketing to take advantage of this window of opportunity of growth, get their names out there in front of customers, just in case down the line the market growth begins to slow. These vendors are spending now to acquire a customer base that will be large enough to sustain them should the market slow down later, so that they will be assured of an ongoing revenue renewal stream and a customer base on which to attach additional sales. Another trend that you'll see in the numbers here is what's going on with niche vendors. I'll be showing you their numbers in the next slide, but for now, I'll just say that we define niche vendors as pure play security vendors that only cover about 1, 2, or 3 of the segments that we've defined in the market. So, for example, we consider CyberArk to be a niche vendor because of its focus on identity and access management. We consider Webroot a niche vendor because it primarily focuses on web security, although, as I say, it's not just one segment, but it's a more limited set of segments. Okay, so these niche vendors grew extremely well in 2Q15. And what we're finding, this is just due to, well, not just, but it's partly due to customer willingness to purchase an unknown brand. Security customers, they completely recognize the benefit of using fewer brands, fewer vendors in their security strategies, because not just will that reduce their complexity and everything they have to, deal with, but it also can drive better results, because within a vendor's platform, they are able to really share intelligence between each other, reset each other's policies, what have you. Customers recognize that, but then when the time comes to spend, they do go on out and acquire another brand and buy another product to plug another hole that may exist in their security, in their attack space. And this is going on throughout 2015, and I expect it's going to extend in 16. So we'll talk about that some more too. Finally, in the segments, I'll show you the 8 segments we cover, but you'll see that security management showed the biggest gain in revenues from 2Q14 to 2Q15. Security management contributed a much larger share of market revenues, and a lot of that was driven by SIMs, Security Information Event Management Systems, and we'll talk about what's changing there. But let's go to the money slide first. What you're looking at here is how TBR has tracked revenue and revenue growth for the 19 vendors in our benchmark. Across the x-axis, you see volume of revenue in the quarter. Now, this is just enterprise security revenue, so in some cases, these are TBR's estimates. For example, we estimated Intel's enterprise security revenue. And on the y-axis, you see the growth rates. So let's talk about a few interesting things here. First off, hey, FireEye did not make triple-digit growth, which is very unusual because up until the end of 2014, FireEye was growing at triple-digit growth rates year to year. And then that went to double-digit in 1Q15, and I think FireEye grew about 58% in 2Q15. Still a fantastic growth rate, but as we saw FireEye reduce its spend on sales and marketing, previously where it was sometimes even above 100% of revenue, but now it's down below revenue, we do see FireEye's growth begin to slow a little bit. That's also in part due, though, that they are growing for a larger base. Now, in that circle, black dotted circle, you see 3 vendors. Dell, which is the Dell security business as well as SecureWorks, Checkpoint, and Intel, which is the Intel security unit, which includes the McAfee as well as some new items. These 3 are stuck in this plateau together, and they have been for quite some time. They're all making about the same revenue amount, those 3 are, and they're growing at about the same pace, and they've just been locked in this battle for one of them to be able to break out of the cluster and do something that just makes them, causes them to grow much faster and then gradually move out to the right of this slide. I think these 3 vendors will do different things to break out of the plateau. Let me tell you what I think they'll do. For Dell, I think it's primarily going to be because of SecureWorks. I've seen Dell give its newest technologies over to SecureWorks, in some cases first, before offering it as a customer-managed product, or in some cases still not as a customer-managed product. It's become the platform for Dell to put forward its latest and greatest in some cases. And so I think that we will see continued growth in SecureWorks that's going to really contribute even more to Dell's total enterprise security revenue and grow Dell out of this plateau. For Checkpoint, I think they will continue with this, the modular flexibility approach that they take, where Checkpoint provides many of its products or technologies, which it calls services, on an appliance or a blade, a rack-mounted blade, or a software blade, so to speak. And this appeals to customers that want that flexible, modular ability to add on here and add on there. So in essence, I think what we'll see is Checkpoint's portfolio will continue to blossom, if you will, with more blades and more software blades too, that could be new packaging for different types and sizes of customers, as well as new technologies. For Intel, we will see, as they just announced at Focus the other day, a renewed focus on just the segments where Intel can become a leader. So Intel is going to shift from being a mile-wide but not terribly deep security provider to getting a lot deeper in certain segments where it has established some expertise already and really invest in those spaces. But even more so, I want to mention that Intel's growth differentiator is going to come from Internet of Things security, IoT security. Intel is already putting its stake in the ground around IoT security, publishing a reference architecture, partnering with industrial vendors such as Honeywell. I believe that's going to be a strong direction for Intel to get growth, security growth, but it's going to take a while because we don't predict that the IoT security revenue stream is really going to start up strongly for a couple more years at least. A couple more things to look at. Symantec. Symantec had a bad quarter for enterprise security revenue, and I kind of think, though, that the 2Q13 is really the end of the bad days at Symantec. They had negative 13%, so they declined 13% year to year in this quarter. This was the disruption caused by the Veritas separation, which directed resources to different activities that took focus a bit off of product development, product launches, and also, though, the effort that was required to go into realigning and retraining channel partners, going out to channel partners and saying, now, are you going to be a security provider partner for us or an information management partner for us, and here's the certifications and the training. That all took resources. And then finally, of course, competitors used that opportunity, the disruption going on at Symantec, to raise FUD around Symantec, and in some cases had some success where they were able to delayed, I think, some Symantec purchases. So Symantec had a rough quarter, but we do see them coming out of that in 2016. Finally, we've got IBM over to the right of our chart, where IBM has been every time we've done a benchmark since we started, about a couple years ago. IBM, as I'll show you, has a great ability to take a product, be it internally developed or acquired, package it for both customer-managed scenarios, on-prem in-house customer-managed, as well as packaging it and delivering it in its managed and hosted platforms, managed hosted services, facilities, and driving great deals of revenue from, very effectively from its development and acquisition dollars. Now, the 19 vendors I just showed you, we break them into 3 classes. We have the core class. Those are the vendors that have a security unit within their overall multi-IT line. So they don't just have security, but they've got networking, or they've got storage, or they've got servers. In our core vendors class, we have vendors like HP, IBM, Dell, Cisco, Huawei. Symantec at the time of this benchmark was still considered a multi-line because they weren't separated from Veritas yet. And RSA. At the time, a part of EMC, now they'll still be considered a multi-line as part of Dell. So we have 9 core vendors, and you see them here in blue, and then the red and the green are pure play security vendors. The red we consider advancing pure plays. They've got a lot of segments covered. They're generally making at least $500 million in enterprise security revenue per year. And then the niche are the green vendors, focused on just a narrower set of security requirements. To give you a feel, an advancing vendor in the red, those would be your checkpoints, FireEye, Fortinet, Palo Alto, and Trend. And in the niche, we look at vendors like CyberArk, Imperva, Kaspersky, Webroot, folks like that. Okay, so what are we seeing on this chart? Compared to a year ago, the core vendors in our benchmark contributed less revenue. They had less of a share of our benchmarked revenues. So we took all 19 vendors. If they were new additions, we looked at them historically to see how they did a year ago. And those core vendors a year ago contributed 73.6% of our benchmarked revenue number, which was $50 billion. Oh, excuse me, that's market. Our 19 vendors were not at $50 billion. But in any case, they were contributing 73% of our benchmark numbers, and now down to 72%. That 1% decline is pretty significant in such a large market. And if you look in the bottom right of the slide, you'll see why this is going on. Core security vendors that have a security business unit within their corporation grew their enterprise security revenue on average even slower than they did a year ago. So they grew, as a set, on average, they grew 4.7% year to year. The advancing and pure plays in the green and the red grew much better. Advancing vendors, there was some slowing of their growth, but still really strong growth at about 30%. And look what's happening with the niche vendors. They're up around 26% growth rate. Now, I had thought that the core vendors would show better growth rate at this time because if you were on my webinar the last time I did this benchmark report, I was saying to you that I believe the multi-line vendors are going to give more autonomy to their security business units because the security business units have such different needs to innovate more quickly. They're addressing different requirements, often driven by fear and customers. So I thought that's what we'd see, that core vendors would just give their security business units more freedom to just take the ball and run. But I didn't actually see that occurring in the past 6 months covered in this benchmark. So all I will say is I still think it's coming. And we'll see greater autonomy, security business units able to make bigger acquisitions, invest in more significant product development, what have you. It's still coming, but until that happens, I think we're going to keep seeing the core vendors losing their growth, losing their share and growing slowly compared to the market. Now, the advancing vendors that I'm showing you in red, they grew very well, and I just want to clarify that the reason for this is not just because they were growing on a smaller base number. Because if you look at a core vendor in blue in our classification, such as HP, and you look at HP's enterprise security revenue, and then you look at a advancing vendor in the red, such as Palo Alto Networks, those two, HP and PAN, had about the same enterprise security revenue in the quarter and a year ago. So they were growing off the same base, approximately. This is very important. We can't attribute the slower growth of core vendors just to the fact that they have a larger base. It is part of the situation, but it's not everything. Advancing pure-play security vendors are getting out there with technologies. Customers want to stay a step ahead of the hackers, and they're willing to spend and bring in additional brands and products to plug the holes. Same thing with the niche vendors. They come forward as particular experts in defeating a particular type of attack, and they will get considered by customers even if the brand name is relatively unknown. Okay, so now I'd like to show you the segments. I mentioned to you that we break the market into 8 segments. I'm showing 7 of them to you here on this pie chart slide. We have 7 that we consider product segments. These are where we're tracking the revenue vendors earned from their hardware and software sold to customers for customers to manage themselves. Our 8th segment, which is not on the pie chart, is a big segment called Managed and Hosted Security Services. But I wanted to just look at customer managed product revenue first. In Q2 15, this is how it broke out in contributions to our benchmarked number. Network security, still the biggest contributor. Firewalls and IPS, network IPS, contributed 35% of the revenue of customer-managed security products in the quarter. The history of network security remains, and we're seeing it. I think we'll still see it down the road. So all the talk about networks becoming porous, that is very true. Network security's contribution will decline. For example, in 6 months, I think this 35% will go down at least to 30%. But it's still a significant revenue driver for Trend, who just purchased Tipping Point, for example. But let's talk about the ones that are going to grow. I pulled out the security management in the light blue for you. The security management segment consists of SIMs, GRCs, and revenue associated with threat intelligence, such as aggregation and analytics. It grew pretty well. A year ago, its slice of the pie was 13%. Now it's 15% contribution to market revenue. That's really good, and what's really driving that is new SIMs that we are seeing. Customers are expecting, and in some cases finding, their SIMs to do more advanced analytics for them and some other more advanced features, some machine learning, some more real-time with greater length of history for forensics, for example. We are calling these super SIMs, and the growth of SIM revenue in general and super SIM in particular is driving this growth rate. Now the bottom 2 that we're showing to you, in yellow is endpoint, and in the darker red is identity and access management. These are also growing segments, contributing nicely to the market, but will contribute even more in the future. And the reason is for these 2 is that customers are spending where the hackers are coming in. Hackers are coming in 2 new ways more frequently now than they did in the past. Instead of coming right up to a network and pinging on the door of the network, they are more frequently coming in through the endpoints, be it social engineering or what have you, and then navigating from there. Or they're coming in with compromised credentials and there wasn't even any malware ever attached. These are 2 new emerging threat vectors. Of course, it's always been going on, but they're becoming even more frequently seen, according to many security research experts today. And so that's where customers are sending their dollars. And that's why we see endpoint and IAM growing nicely as contributors to the market. Now, those were the 7 customer-managed segments. Now, what we're looking at here is where I'm showing you also that 8th big segment of managed and hosted services. The the light blue that you see here are those 7 product segments and how much revenue each of our covered vendors got from their customer-managed product sales. And in the the dark blue, you see managed and hosted services. Let me say that this is the revenue that vendors earned from their own facilities and staff. We're not including revenue where a security vendor sells its product to a third-party service provider, say like Telefonica, we're not counting that as managed and hosted revenue. We're counting that as a sale to Telefonica, so that's a product thing. But this is where a vendor has built its own SOCs or other, maybe even a virtual SOC. But in any case, vendors are delivering the managed or hosted security service from their own capabilities. So here's where you see what I mentioned about IBM, for example. IBM has built up its SOCs extensively. It's acquired recently some hosted security service providers too. And this is where we're seeing IBM monetizing its development and acquisition dollars to drive revenue from two streams, customer managed or we'll do it for you. Of course, you have to have a certain size of revenue in order to be able to afford to build these facilities, but once they do, vendors like IBM can almost double their money from their developments and acquisitions. Now, SecureWorks, which is in the middle of this slide for Dell, contributed nicely to Dell's total enterprise security revenue, and I think we'll see that go even higher, as Dell will often use SecureWorks as a way to bring the latest and greatest out to customers, give customers a way to access the newest threat detection and response technologies before the customer even has time to get trained on it themselves. They just can turn right to a provider such as SecureWorks to start benefiting from the newest technologies quickly. Down at the bottom, I drew your attention to Imperva and Webroot, because what I'm seeing happen with them is an overall trend where customers now are even more frequently looking for hosted security services rather than just managed. So, managed security services are where the customer does do some ownership. The customer may buy the hardware, license the software, and then turn to the vendor and say, okay, now would you monitor and upgrade and manage this for us and just let us know when there's a problem. Versus hosted, which some folks might call cloud-based security services. Hosted is where the customer doesn't take ownership of almost anything at all, and just really gets a turnkey capability provided by the hosted security service provider. We're seeing an increasing interest in this due to ongoing staff shortages, skill shortages, and my goodness, the hackers just keep coming up with more new things. So customers are turning more and more frequently to hosted services to get themselves ahead of the hackers quickly. Here's the geo slide I promised you. So this is growth rate for all our benchmarked vendors as a group, and how they did as a group in their revenue growth in Americas, EMEA, and APAC. So Americas went fine. Americas tends to be around a 23% growth rate, give or take a few percentage points, and same thing in 2Q15, so nice steady growth in Americas. APAC grew nicely. About a year ago, we were showing like 10 to 12% growth in APAC, of APAC businesses buying security solutions. That's growing as APAC businesses are targeted a little bit more frequently, fertile ground for the hackers. But look what happened in EMEA. I was shocked when I saw this. EMEA revenue for our vendors only grew 7.2% in 2Q15 compared to 2Q14. That is very unusual. A couple of years ago, we were seeing EMEA's growth more like in the 25%, even 30% growth range. 7%? So I reached out to some folks to find out what's going on, and I've mentioned this before, but it continued this quarter, so I want to mention it again. Customers in EMEA are still delaying their purchasing decisions. They're not starting up new security projects. They're not bringing in new products as often as they would like, because they're still waiting for further clarification from governments in the region, especially the EU, to clarify what is going to be an acceptable level of privacy, what is going to be an acceptable geo-data location policy. Customers don't want to invest till they know what's going to be okay, what the government recommends, and then they'll make their investments. So there's this pent-up demand. This 7.2% is, to me, an indication there's pent-up demand, and I think it's going to spring free in 1Q, 2Q16, because I see the EU governments coming much closer to clarification on frameworks and recommendation and frankly even directives and laws, as well as I don't think customers can keep this pent up this long. As long as they're delaying their decisions and putting off their projects, these customers in EMEA are increasing their risk. So I believe that this was a, like a 6 to 9 month phenomenon. I don't think it will continue in 16. The pent-up demand is going to start being shown in purchases in 2016 in EMEA. That was the end of my prepared slide. I'll take any Q&As, and let me just read the Q&As that have come in. And while I do, I'll show you our taxonomy for you to be looking at as I speak.
And I'd just like to clarify, can you send any of your questions through the Q&A function? It's just easier for Jane to read them on our end if you send them to the Q&A rather than the chat. So, thank you.
All right. So I see a couple of questions coming in. So let me take those ones first. Okay, the first person has asked, what's going to happen with Symantec's revenue in the future? So this person is referring to Symantec having a bad quarter in 2Q13 and having revenue declines due to its separation from Veritas, resource redirection during that, and competitors raising FUD around Symantec. Unfortunately, I think the ramifications will not be completely corrected in 2016. We're forecasting that Symantec will decline much, much less, or perhaps even be flat in revenue, enterprise security revenue 2016. But it'll probably take till early 2017 for Symantec to actually show growth again in enterprise security revenue. And I think we'll start seeing them around the 5% growth range in 2017. Okay, I knew someone would want to ask about this. What will Dell do with RSA? And this person is referring to Dell's purchase of EMC, which includes RSA security products as well as AirWatch under VMware. So first we have to say that, of course, Dell is not able to comment on this. So anything I can say is my own personal opinion because this acquisition is not finalized. Dell and RSA and EMC are not able to indicate too much yet. But here's what I think. When I look at RSA's portfolio, I think RSA Security Analytics, which is the name of the product, not just the function, I think RSA Security Analytics is a great addition for Dell. I can see how Dell can place that product into SecureWorks and get even stronger threat insights and better basis for making response decisions because they'll be able to leverage the terrific big data analytics capability in RSA Security Analytics. So that, to me, that was a clear win where Dell will now have that capability as well as access to RSA Security Analytics customers. The other parts of the RSA product line are a little unclear. There's some overlap between RSA VIA and Dell One, Dell ONE, Dell One Identity Access Management. So how Dell will rationalize that is not yet clear. And then the other thing that could go either way, I guess, in my personal opinion, is Archer, which is RSA's GRC, governance risk compliance platform with many products on that. Whether or not Dell will become a GRC vendor with Archer or not, that remains to be seen. Okay, any other questions? Okay, just bear with me while I get it. We're having a little difficulty here where the questions aren't popping up properly on my screen just yet. Okay, here we go. Okay, this next person is asking about software-defined networking and NFV trends. Do I see them as a threat to security vendors or SDN players as a threat to security vendors? It certainly will delay decisions around network security because customers will question how much do I really need to be running these network security products in the same way as opposed to how I'm going to run them in an SDN environment. However, I believe that customers will still see, as they use these new environments, they'll still see just as much of a need as they do today for their network security devices. So it's a threat in the sense that network security vendors will need to spend more to prove their value and engage with more competitors. But long term, I don't actually see SDN having a huge negative impact on the network security market. Okay, I think that's it for the questions, so I'll turn this back to Justin.
All right, so yeah, that's it. Thank you, Jane, and thank you everyone for your attendance today and for sending in your questions. You can follow Jane as well as TBR on Twitter and our assorted social media accounts, and we encourage you to visit our YouTube page and SlideShare page to view our previously aired webinars. Additionally, before you sign off, I'd like to ask you to take a very brief survey on the webinar today. We're always looking to improve both the information we provide and how we provide it to you. So we do look at those results, and we'd greatly appreciate you to take your time to fill that out. We'll leave the chat function open for another minute or so if people ask any last-minute questions. Otherwise, thanks for attending, and have a great afternoon.